Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
Come on, Chelsea!
Today, we are looking at times that the Chelsea Headhunters were caught by surprise from smaller firms. Not turned over, just caught out. Everything you hear is a true account from a very well-respected headhunter called Bully. The following are all his own words. On the football front, I was going as often as I could. Derby County away in '81 was probably some of the worst violence I've ever witnessed at a football match. To put it politely, it went mental. About 4,000 or 5,000 Chelsea fans travelled up there, the majority by British Rail football specials. We came straight out of Derby Station and found a pub, and if I remember rightly, it was called the Victoria. Anyway, that got wrecked. We just took the whole pub over. Someone found the key for the shed out the back, where all the stock was kept, so spirits and beer was being passed out, and handed around and drunk. Now, everyone was well oiled up. The bar staff couldn't work out why everyone's stumbling around drunk, and yet no one's paying at the bar for the bottles of beer and spirits they were drinking. Everyone was getting more and more drunk, and the pub more packed, as the word spread that the Victoria was the pub for a free drink. They had ornamental swords hanging on the walls, and it wasn't long before they went missing. Next thing, the pub empties as word goes around that Tottenham are in town. Apparently, a mob of Spurs has stopped off in Derby, on their way to Nottingham to play Forest, and had slapped a few Chelsea scarves. They didn't realise just how big a mob we had out that day, but they soon found out as we found them on the platform of the station and smashed them to bits. They got mullered. They were running down the tracks to get away, and one geezer locked himself in the station waiting room. As we came out of the station, a mob of Derby appeared and came straight into us. It was one of the longest battles I've ever seen at football. It went on relentless for a good 5 minutes. People were being hit and either went down or carried on fighting. No one from either side took a backward step. The old Bill just couldn't stop it. Finally, the two firms were pushed apart with, I'd have to say, the honours going to Derby. Inside the ground, a few of us got into the home end and kicked it off. We stayed in there until just before half-time, and then the old Bill moved in and slung us out, and put us in with the rest of the Chelsea masses. Afterwards, it was going off everywhere as we were escorted back to the station. I'll give Derby their due. They came into us at every opportunity. At every street corner, they'd make a stand, and we'd roar across the road at them. And then another mob of theirs would come from the other side of the street, or from behind us. The Derby streets were only narrow with rows and rows of brick-built terraced houses, and the sound of rioting echoed through them streets that day. On that day's performance, I rate Derby's firm highly. There was only 13,000 fans at the baseball ground for that game, and Clive Walker scored for us, and some geezer called Osgood scored for them. It wasn't the great Peter Osgood scoring an own goal, but a Derby player named Keith Osgood. I wonder whatever happened to him. Cambridge away was another game where we took huge numbers. 5 of us drove from Romford and stopped in some little picturesque village outside of Cambridge. On the trip, that day was me, Jermaine, Windmill, Wingnut and Doddy. We had a few beers and talked about football and what to expect of Cambridge's firm that day. A few of the boys doubted that Cambridge even had a firm. "Ain't it all students on bikes dressed in black cloaks with mortarboards on their heads?" one of the lads asked. "The thing is, little teams like your Cambridge and Oxford and York and Hereford can pull good firms on their day and will always turn out for the big boys. They may not meet their visitors head on, but they turn out and have a pop and do a quick kamikaze at tack. Teams like Cambridge couldn't go toe-to-toe with teams like us, or Man United, or Leeds or Spurs. But if there was 50 of them, and 50 of us, then they'd give a good account of themselves." On the day we parked up near the ground and bumped into Hickey, who'd run one of his coaches up there, it was agreed that we'd all pay to go into the home end and meet up at the back. We devised a plan that I'd make out that one of the boys was deaf and dumb, and that I'd do all the talking. Outside the turnstiles, under the watchful eye of the local constabulary, I tried my hand at some sign language. It worked, and as I paid for both of us to get in, and we sailed through without a hitch. Our mob was everywhere, and within 5 minutes of mobbing up, it kicked off. About 10 of us got separated from the rest of the boys, and we were having a right old battle down in the corner. Outside, we swarmed all over them and gave the Cambridge leader, the General, a good hiding. Really, Hickey saved him from further punishment. He was on the ground, nearly spark out. "Hang on, lads, he's had enough," said Hickey. "No, he ain't," said a few of us. "He's a gobby mug who deserves all he gets." How the fuck was this prick Cambridge's top boy? He was only in his early 20s, if that, and he had hardly any hair, and he had a face like E.T., and was about as fat as a chip. The poor cunt didn't have a lot going for him. While we were arguing amongst ourselves, this little hobbit slipped away. He must have escaped unharmed because I've since seen him in the Lord of the Rings film. Near the exit, Cambridge came back into us, and the old Bill, in a bit of a panic, closed the gates shut, and a few of us were trapped inside the ground with their firm. Outside, on the other side of the gates, the old Bill was having a right job in holding the Chelsea hordes back from joining us. That was the first time I met Giles from Chelsea, and since that day, we've been good friends. I know a few teams that have come unstuck at Cambridge. They have a game, Little Mob. Music-wise, I fell out of love with it. It was the time of the New Romantics, with Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet being the new kids on the block, but they did nothing for me. A funny story from our trip to Cambridge was of a local fisherman sitting on a brick bridge without a care in the world, with his rod in his hand. It was very quaint and picture postcard. He looked very relaxed as he sat just across the way from us. We could see him as we made our way into the ground, and next thing some Chelsea fans have walked past him and gave him a shove in the back and sent him flying into the fast-flowing waters. It was a miracle, but he landed upright with his fishing rod still in his hand, but the waters were lapping around his chin and he was in a bit of a panic. Next thing the old Bill have turned up, and in their attempts to rescue him, a couple of them have slid down the muddy riverbank and gone arse over, tight straight into the water. Hundreds of Chelsea fans cheered and laughed as the Keystone Cops made a right balls up of their rescue. In them days, we played teams like Wrexham and Preston. Orient and Grimsby Life was shit in the old second division, but us die-hard Chelsea fans were very loyal. It's a pity some of the players didn't have the same enthusiasm as us fans. One nice fixture in those days was a trip down to Cardiff. I rate them in the top 10 firms in Britain. Over the years, they've had some right battles with their old rivals from the Den Millwall. For the game down there, a few of us met at Paddington Station early and used our student rail cards and Purcell vouchers to get train tickets. Suddenly, a mob of about 100 geezers came marching across the station towards us. We knew they weren't Chelsea. "Is this your firm, Chelsea?" asked the huge black geezer fronting this mob. "No," I said, looking around a bit nervously, as there was only about 40 of us scattered. I later found out that the guy was Cass Pennant. Today we were off to Grimsby to watch the mighty Blue Boys. By the looks of it, me, Prikey, Doddy and Skin were the only Chelsea fans on this train. Most, I suppose, had gone up earlier on the football special. We changed at Newark and then got on an old rattler to Cleethorpes. We must have stopped at 20 or more stations en route. We got off the other end at a near deserted station and found a pub, which wasn't exactly a hive of activity, as inside was one old boy with a cloth cap on, sat at the bar supping a pint with a pipe hanging out the side of his mouth. He had a dog at his feet, which was bent over, double, licking its arse and bollocks. Could the day get better? We drank up, walked along the narrow cobbled streets, and headed for the seafront. Fucking hell, this place was a ghost town. We saw a few fishermen, dressed in yellow oilskin suits, on their way back home after a night's work, but there was no young people or anyone that even slightly resembled a football fan. We found a fish and chip shop, and this place seemed to have more life than the rest of the town. Even we got excited as we eat probably the best fish and chips I've ever had in me life. Our big firm of four decided to head towards Blundell Park, the stadium where Grimsby Town plays. We walked past a pub, and this time it looked a bit more promising, as there were 7 Grimsby fans sitting at the window watching the world go by. As we walked in, the place went silent. We ordered our drinks and went and sat in the corner, skinned up, and smoked a few joints. That felt better now we'd been fed and watered. Still no sign of any other Chelsea fans, and we all decided, as we sipped our pints, that it had been a long old journey just to watch a football match. Donkey jackets and fishermen's wellies seemed to be in fashion in Grimsby, and the clobber we had on seemed to make people stare at us. We walked off towards the ground, or should I say floated off towards the ground, as the weed had started taking effect. The ground appeared around the next corner, and a sign hanging on a rusty chain-link fence informed us that it was "Away fans to the right." So us being awkward bastards went left and followed the few home fans that were about. We could see Findus written on the roof of one of the stands, and we laughed. This area must have been reserved for Captain Birdseye lookalikes only, or worse birds with smelly minges. We queued up and got some strange looks from the locals. It wasn't in our blood to turn and walk away. We paid to get in and made our way out onto the terraces. The Chelsea fans that had made the trip were packed behind the goal at the other end of the ground, and they were in good voice. Meanwhile, it hadn't taken the locals long to suss us out, and a small group stood behind us as we leant on one of the metal barriers, having a coffee. "What a shithole," said Doddy aloud. About 200 of their boys packed behind the goal, in the middle of the terrace, chanted, "Grimsby! Grimsby!" A few of them looked our way and pointed at us. I think they knew we were there and were strangers in the camp. It was only a matter of time before we came under attack. We looked around, hoping to catch sight of a few familiar faces. Perhaps a few of the Chelsea boys had had the same idea as us and had come into the home end. In those days, Chelsea had a bit of a reputation for invading and taking ends. I felt like a boxer waiting to go into the ring. I had butterflies in my stomach, and I could tell the others were worried because our idle, nervous chat had stopped. I also noticed a lack of policemen in this end, as they all seemed to be down the Chelsea end of the ground. Then I heard it. "Come on, you Chelsea wankers, let's have it." I looked around and noticed their mob surrounding us had grown. They must have all gone to the same school, as they all had on identical donkey jackets. "Come on, you southern wankers," said one big-mouthed cunt amongst them, traces of angry spit bubbling up on his pencil-thin moustache that only northerners think looked trendy. And then it went. They came down the terrace at us, and my coffee went everywhere. Good job it wasn't Starbucks at £3 a cup. I would have had the right hump. A few of theirs hit the deck, caught by a couple of good shots from Prikey and me. Doddy had been knocked down, and it looked like he was out cold and in big trouble, as he was getting kicked to the head, and Bodyskin dived in and sheltered Doddy as best he could. But he was getting whacked, and was getting weaker, and now he was in danger of going over. I then heard the Chelsea fans singing, North Stand, do your job. A song the Shed Boys would sing when there was trouble at Stamford Bridge. The North Stand boys were seen as the real hardcore hooligans in those days, but the truth was, today, we weren't really doing that good a job, and in reality, were getting a good hiding. Next thing, the old Bill moved in and dragged us through the crowds and out of the ground. We were slung up against a wall and cautioned. We were told we had 10 minutes to get as far away from the ground as possible. After that, if the old Bill saw us again, then we would be arrested. So, their best advice was to piss off and thank our lucky stars we hadn't been nicked. We limped off, licking our wounds as we heard the crowd roaring, which signalled the game had just kicked off. We stopped at the top of the road and checked if everyone was okay. Without saying a word, we knew each of us wanted revenge on these slags, and we knew we didn't have to wait long because the gates to let fans leave early would be open 20 minutes before the final whistle. We knew going back into their end for revenge would be suicide, so we devised a plan to plot up near some public toilets just outside the ground. So that's what we done. As soon as we heard the final whistle and a cheer go up, we knew we had to act quickly. Them cunts inside the ground had taken right liberties, so now it was our turn to dish out a bit of punishment. However, we had to do it swiftly and get on our toes and have it away before we were collared by the local old Bill. Doddy couldn't wait to get started, but in reality, he couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. He just couldn't hold his hands up. He wasn't a lightweight. He was more a paperweight. He was more into arson and loved burning things and blowing things up. He was our explosives man who loved November the 5th. It was the same when he got put on his arse in the ground. Okay, we were getting chinned, but he only got caught with one shot, which was no more than a girly slap, and he was out cold. 3 thuggish-looking young men who looked like they were up for a row but in desperate need of a piss approached the gents' toilets. Once inside, we battered them. They didn't stand a chance. "Tell your bully mates we're Chelsea," we said. It was payback time, and our exercise went like clockwork. The Chelsea SAS had carried out its mission behind enemy lines and were now off. We walked briskly back through the crowds as if nothing had happened. At the station, we met up with the rest of the Chelsea fans and boarded the train back to London. My leg was fucked, and I had a black eye and a swollen lip. Doddy's ribs were killing him from the kicking he took, and Skin and Prikey had various cuts, lumps and bruises. I ached for days after that, but it answered one question Doddy had asked. On the train, on the way up, "Do you reckon Grimsby's got a firm?" After that, I never really saw Doddy a lot, although he did come to a few games, and then he disappeared. Doddy was a close friend of mine for years and years, and then, as I say, he just disappeared. Maybe he grew up and decided to give it a rest. A couple of the lads reckon he may have died, and we never heard. I think, when my daughters were born, and when my wife left me, that he would have got in touch, as we were very close. Personally, I think he's no longer with us, but if he's still around and he reads this, then get in touch, mate. It's been a long time, but I'd love to hear from you. Perhaps he's playing cards somewhere with Lord Lucan, or working in a fireworks factory in China. Now that would be right up his street. One such game was Barnsley away. I don't think they changed it for television purposes. I think the FA were just giving the Friday night fixture a bit of a trial. I'd come across Barnsley's firm at an FA Cup game between them and non-league Enfield, which was played at Spurs, White Hart Lane Stadium. Enfield turned out a good firm, but not good enough to take on and do Barnsley. The usual suspects of me, Doddy, Skin and Prikey got the train from London on Friday lunchtime and decided to stop off in Sheffield before carrying on by train to Barnsley. Once in Sheffield, we found a typical northern pub, which was in desperate need of some modernising and a bit of decorating. Inside, it had the usual dartboard, fruit machine, and of course, no one in it. To our surprise, we spotted a mob of about 15 Barnsley fans on the lookout for Chelsea fans like us, who were changing trains. There was only 4 of us, so we gave them a swerve and got on the train to Barnsley. Next thing, the old Bill have turned up with dogs and ordered us off the train and onto the platform, where they searched us. They informed us that we'd been stopped because we'd been seen provoking Barnsley fans and hurling insults at them outside the train station. We all looked at one another in disbelief. As they were holding us, the last train to Barnsley, which we'd been sitting on, pulled out of the station. "You've got 2 choices," said one of the coppers. "You've got 20 minutes to fuck off out of Sheffield, or you get the next train back to London." Crikey came up with the idea of catching a coach to Barnsley, so that's what we did. The coach ride was only about half an hour from Sheffield, and we managed to grab a few beers to take on board with us. Things were looking up. We sat up the back of the coach like naughty schoolboys, and as the beer flowed, we got a little drunk and a bit noisy. There was only about 10 people on the coach. Be fair, who in their right mind would want to go to Barnsley on a Friday night? After a while, I ended up punching a Barnsley lad that was sat in front of me on the coach. The bloke who I punched had a bit of sense to calm his mate and the situation down, and the coach carried on into Barnsley bus station with no more bother. The game had already kicked off when we arrived, and after a short walk, we could see the ground's floodlights lighting up the dark Yorkshire sky. The streets were deserted, and then out of a side street looking lost came half a dozen fellow Chelsea fans. As we got to the ground, our newfound friends went and paid to get in the Chelsea section. We, being a bit more daring and out for a bit of revenge after the Enfield game, decided to go in where the home supporters were congregated. We paid to get in with no hassle and walked down the terraces until we came to a metal fence that separated the Chelsea fans from the Barnsley fans. It took the Barnsley fans all of a minute to suss us out, and we got heaps of abuse. "You cockney wankers, fuck off out of here," was only one of the shouts hurled at us. Then coins were coming from behind us and skimming over our heads. "Fucking hell," I said, "we've got to get out of here." Skin and Doddy made the first attempt to scale the fence and to escape, but just as they held onto the bars and began to pull themselves up, then it started. Barnsley's mob came hurtling down the terraces at us. The first wave came into us, kicking and punching. We had nowhere to go, and all we could do was fight. We had our backs to the fence, and behind us, the Chelsea hordes pushed towards us from their section. But to be honest, there was nothing they could do to help us. For some reason, the Barnsley onslaught subsided for a few seconds, and they backed off and gave a couple of yards space between them and us. 2 plainclothes coppers and 4 uniformed Old Bill grabbed us and dragged us up the terrace and through the Barnsley mob. We were being kicked and punched and spat on as the crowd parted like the Red Sea, and the police threw us up against a wall outside. It was name and address time, and then an escort back to the station. We were then told if we didn't leave town then, and there we would find ourselves locked up in the police cells for the weekend. What is it with Northern Old Bill and Chelsea fans? We sat on the station platform well pissed off. We'd come here for revenge, and all we'd done is come unstuck at yet another northern dreary outpost. Then Doddy came up with what he thought was an amazing idea. His plan was to book into a hotel or B&B, and when all the crowds and the police had gone, then we'd sneak out of the hotel at about 4 in the morning and burn the ground down. At the time, it sounded like a good idea, but we soon dismissed it as a bit too extreme and just a touch over the top. Ignoring the Old Bill's threat to bang us up, we decided to walk back down to the ground. At the turnstiles, we told the old boy on the exit gate that we'd arrived late from London as our car had broken down on the motorway, and we had to leave the car and walk to the ground. Instantly, he opened the gate and waved us in. "Come on in, lads. It's the least I can do." Fucking hell. Someone with a bit of compassion. "Cheers, mate," we all said as we trooped in, proud that our cock and bull story had worked. The game was well into the second half as we looked around the 1,500 or so Chelsea supporters that had made the long trip. But, by the looks of it, we didn't have much of a firm, but you never could tell with our support. At the first sign of a punch-up, the shirts and the shed boys could sometimes be the first ones in. At the end of the game, the police held us back inside the ground for 10 minutes, and when they thought it was safe for us to leave, they opened the exit gate and we swarmed out onto the street. It was pitch black, but almost immediately we could make out a mob standing directly in front of us. This firm came straight into us with fists and boots flying. We just stood firm and gave as good as we were getting. An almighty push from behind sent a tidal wave of Chelsea fans into the Barnsley mob. There was no way, even if we had of wanted to stop it. It was like a dam bursting as a sea of bodies flowed forward. We had the Barnsley firm on the move as we chased them all the way back around the main stand. The old Bill moved in and started nicking a few people. How else was the money going to be raised to pay for the policing on the night? A few £1,000s through the courts and into the police coffers might well help, I think. The police call it processing. Nick as many people as you can, get them in court for any reason, and fine the fuck out of them. Good old British justice at its best. It was funny on the night I didn't see many Barnsley fans getting their collars felt. The police took control and it looked like it was all over. We'd done well and had given a good account of ourselves. A lot of the crowd started to dwindle and wander off in different directions. Some headed for the nearest pub, others off to their cars for the long drive back south, and a few headed for the railway station. We could sense we were being followed, so a few of us, who were up for a row, dropped back. A fight started across the road, and a few Chelsea got run up ahead. Another row started, and again a group of Chelsea fans got scattered. We crossed the road towards the trouble, and a group of Barnsley was standing on a street corner. Without a word, Skin chinned one of them and put him on his arse. That was the signal for the rest of them to bolt. A few more Chelsea came across the road to back us up. These weren't major players, just normal fans I'd seen at a few games. I hadn't seen any of our main faces here tonight. No Hickey, no Babs or Eccles. He'd long since retired. Rumour had it he was out in Rhodesia fighting in a mercenary unit, a real-life dog of war. Up ahead of us now was more trouble with a few Chelsea fans being chased back towards us, but the old Bill got in between the two sets of fans and pushed the Barnsley fans towards us. Now it was game on, we fanned out across the road in an attempt to make our firm look bigger. The Barnsley mob stopped, and it seemed unaware how to deal with us. We took the initiative and steamed straight into them. This time they stood and came straight into us. I don't know what happened to the rest of the lads with us, but again it was down to us four. Skin in his anger disappeared into the centre of the Barnsley firm. Next thing, a copper's released his dog from its lead, and the first arse it seemed to have a chomp on was poor old Skin's. It ripped his jeans and his skid-marked pants and exposed his bare buttocks as it pulled him to the floor. But I give Skin his due. He wasn't just lying there and letting the dog have all its own way. He was punching the fuck out of it as they rolled around on the floor, WWF style. Hulk Hogan, or should I say Skiddy Skin, was then carted off. As we stopped momentarily to watch all this, some Barnsley cunts sneaked up beside me and cracked me up the side of the head with one powerful punch. The force of the shot knocked me down, but before any of them could move in to finish me off, Prikey came to my rescue and whacked one of their main boys. This gave me time to get to my feet, and off we went again, back into them. The old Bill moved in on horseback, and the rest of us slipped away. We sat on the station for ages, waiting for a train, and within earshot was a group of Chelsea fans boasting loudly of how they'd just run Barnsley's firm. The bollocks they were spouting made my blood boil, and I pulled the mouthy one amongst them and told him a few home truths. In the end, I just lost it and gave him a slap. I was so fucking angry. Skin went to court back in Barnsley a few weeks later and received a £500 fine for threatening behaviour. He appeared in court under his real name, David Hailing, or Alien as some people pronounced it. He got the name of Skin simply because at one time he was a skinhead. All in all, it was a Friday night to remember. Chelsea have come up against many other mobs, and there are lots more stories to tell. So I urge you to go out and get this book, Bully CFC, The Life and Crimes of a Chelsea Headhunter. I will leave a link in the description if you wish to purchase it. I own it, and I personally recommend it. I appreciate you all taking the time out to watch my videos. It means a lot. So please keep watching. And if you do want to support, then just subscribe and give the video a like. Until next time, God bless. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.